Yes, thank you very much. So yes, I'm sort of representing a wider team of people based at the University of Leeds who are working on our waterlands project, which we're aiming to support upscale peatland restoration across the whole of north of England in a sort of a large landscape that's called the Great North Bog now. I'd like to particularly say thanks to one of my colleagues, Anthony Blundell, who's a lot of this material and activities based around his work. So yes, our landscapes have always looked like this. In particular, we're working in these sort of upland blanket peatland landscapes across the north of England, and we sort of see that actually the present ecological state of these systems is not really historically typical based on what we see in the past. And we sort of developed this system across these landscapes where we are sort of dominant of major dominance of one vegetation type, and that's heather. And we can sort of see that across large parts of the north of England. So we can kind of see, hopefully, partly through this map, you can see sort of those brown areas of these largely heather-dominated landscapes across the north of England. And they're sort of quite monocultural in many respects. And restoration is aiming to try and boost that diversity across that landscape. And these peatlands have been, under lots of pressure from lots of different activities through the history, and that's climate change as well as human activities. And sort of two of the major aspects, well, really around, or revolve around this land use around grouse shooting in these moorland landscapes. And it's kind of a really recent phenomena, sort of several hundred years old, and we've seen a sort of a real intensification of that activity in more recent times. And two of the sort of really human-based activities that have had a major impact to drainage. And I think that comes back to previous comments from other speakers around policy and science. And this was something that was a policy-driven approach. We'd drain these landscapes, and that could then allow for further agricultural activity in that landscape. And soon realised that's a bad thing. And I think that's one thing that, in terms of restoration, most people are on board with that now. So we blocking lots of these drains and gullies and improving the water tables around that. But one of the major sticking issues we have is around burning of the landscape. So the heather, to control heather growth, to allow for grouse, for the different stages of the grouse growing. They like to have heather at different heights. And the main activity they use to control that is burning. And that's small scale burning of the landscape, and more recently moving towards mowing as well as part of that. And it's kind of controlling that, and it's just sort of perpetuating this monoculture that we see. And what we see, there's quite a lot of opposition to change from a landowner perspective. I mean, we are probably on that end extreme of a small number of large landowners across that landscape, very influential in terms of policy and have the right ears of the policymakers. But sort of more locally, we see these responses from landowners and particularly land managers. The sites always look like this. And that's in part because there's no historical context to kind of appreciate that. So it's a generational thing that, my father did it and maybe his grandfather did it, therefore we do this. And it's kind of like trying to change that mentality a little bit. And we end up in this status quo that really heather is the climax community and burning is a solution to deal with that. So what we try to do is debunk that and say that these landscapes have not always looked like this. We can use a paleoarchive to tell us that actually this kind of history of these peatlands has been very different in the past. So we can start to look through time at what these landscapes look like in the past and kind of reconstruct what they previously looked like. And that then tells us about the type of species that were present and how we can go about managing them into the future. And what we find is that really toward the top end of these, the peat, we see a lot of degradation within that system. So the sort of last 500 years has been this human overload. We see like this dominance of heather, high decomposition, which we shouldn't really be seeing in these wetland landscapes, and also lots of evidence of burning. Slight absence of sphagnum and this change in the dominant taxa. And there's numerous reasons for this. So there is, we've had a lot of industrial pollution across the north of England that have stripped the vegetation and caused major damage to that. But also there's been this expansion of game estate management and wildfires. And what we can do is we can hopefully sort of demonstrate that these landscapes in a healthy functioning state can provide a broad range of ecosystem services, particularly water supply and water quality and erosion protection for ourselves as well. Carbon storage and climate regulation. Carbon storage is one of the main drivers for funding for restoration across the UK at the moment. So Nature for Climate, in its very sort of name, is pushing for that. So what we're trying to do to debunk that really is engage practitioners, landowners and land managers by sort of carrying out workshops to bring them along to the peatlands and actually look underneath and see what that landscape looked like in the past, and just get them to sort of hands-on see what this landscape looked like in the past, you know, get their hands on material that's several thousand years old, and just appreciate that sort of maybe more recently we have been moving in a sort of singular direction that we can perhaps move against. So our landscapes have not always looked like this.